In 2023, Italian and Spanish law enforcement officials busted a counterfeiting ring and seized tens of thousands of dollars in illegal goods. But it wasn't fine art or currency that the criminals were faking. It was olive oil. Officials seized over 260,000 liters of bogus extra virgin olive oil and arrested 11 suspects for cutting it with olive-derived lamp oil. And this is just one example of food fraud, which is a $40 billion industry that generally involves replacing a food or ingredient on the label with an inferior one. You might think you're enjoying a delicacy like, say, bluefin tuna, when in reality, you're eating a cheaper fish that's been dyed with beet juice. So here are some of the world's most counterfeited foods and how science can detect the frauds and keep them off the shelves. Olive oil fakery is a pretty common practice, and old, too. According to archaeological evidence, even some ancient Romans dabbled in some olive oil forgery to turn a quick dollar, or a sestertius. That's a joke for all of you ancient Roman currency lovers. The cardinal rule of food forgery is the product has to taste, feel, and smell enough like the real deal to fool consumers. So there's a process that goes into making counterfeit olive oil taste like it's hot off the olive press on a sunny Mediterranean hillside. With olive oil, it usually involves slapping an extra virgin sticker on a bottle of inferior oil, or cutting real olive oil with other types of oil and altering its color with chlorophyll or beta-carotene. But not all olive oil heists are busted by a multinational sting operation. Some use science to separate the real oil from the fake. Although the olive oil police doesn't yet have an industry standard for detecting fraudulent oil, a 2019 study compared a variety of different methods and found DNA analysis is one of the most efficient methods of detecting adulterated oil. DNA-based techniques for sleuthing out olive oil fakes involve extracting residual genetic material from the oil and looking for unique molecular markers, or specific DNA sequences, found there. This method is so specific, it can reliably tell us if the oil is cut with a different type of vegetable oil, and even how many and which varieties of olive that oil was made from. Moving on from oil to something that you might want to cook in it, fish. There are a lot of fish in the sea, and some of them are mislabeled at your local meat counter. Fraudulent substitutions in the seafood market usually involve passing a cheaper fish off as another, more expensive fish. This can be a huge problem for people with food allergies, or even those of us trying to watch our mercury intake. For instance, according to one Oceana study, as much as 59% of the tuna in the store is mislabeled. It's usually swapped out with a cheaper fish, like escalar. Scallops are another frequently faked seafood. The show Inside Edition hired Applied Food Technologies, a company that specializes in seafood authenticity testing. Applied Food Technologies used an FDA-validated technique called DNA barcoding to see what several NYC restaurants were actually serving in place of the scallops the restaurant said they were. DNA barcoding is used when a scientist is faced with genetic material of completely mysterious origins. A short, specific fragment of DNA is taken from the sample and compared against a vast taxonomic library of genetic barcodes. Turns out some of them weren't scallops at all, and were either a different type of seafood or possibly made from a slurry of homogenized fish paste. And then there's the really pricey stuff, like caviar. It's a moneymaker for food fraudsters because it's both expensive and hard to come by. Demand for caviar, or eggs harvested directly from a sturgeon's ovaries, has outpaced the farmed fish populations, which means there's a growing problem of shady caviar on the market. And sure, this problem sounds bougie, but it can have serious conservation implications. Because in most countries, caviar is only legal if harvested from sturgeon raised on farms. So one way these caviar traffickers can try to make more money is by illegally poaching wild sturgeon. This particular fraud isn't limited to sturgeon either. Their close relatives, the paddlefish, are also sometimes the victims of this type of poaching, since paddlefish eggs look and apparently taste pretty similar to caviar. One giant 2013 Missouri bust by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Missouri Department of Conservation apprehended 112 paddlefish poachers, 13 of whom were charged with the federal crime of illegally trafficking in paddlefish. Because paddlefish are a real target for caviar criminals, busts like the one in Missouri only made a little dent in the problem. One study found that around 30% of caviar on the European market was harvested in violation of conservation laws. Fortunately, it turns out that you can use science to detect that too. Researchers have identified isotope signals in fish roe that indicate where the fish was living when its eggs were harvested, meaning that you can tell the difference between wild-caught versus farm-raised eggs. The same study found that 10% of the caviar they tested wasn't even eggs. These faked products contained what the lab suspected to be sturgeon offal, aka organ meat, unidentifiable DNA, and various non-biological products, which is gross and not at all fancy. Now let's move to the sweets. Honey is another often faked food, usually by diluting real honey with high fructose corn syrup. A 2023 report by the EU found that 46% of imported honey showed some signs of adulteration, which indicates just how widespread the issue is. Of course, there are some methods to detect this funny honey. There's DNA barcoding to tell whether there's any non-honey products in your bear-shaped bottle, which can detect the fake stuff at concentrations as low as 1%. Another test is even easier. A reagent is added to a small honey sample, and the tester just waits for the color to change and proteins to coagulate. The accuracy of this one is still being worked out, but this test has the added benefit of being pretty low-tech. And a cheap, easy way to tell if honey is legit sounds pretty sweet to me.
This SciShow video is supported by Bombas, which is perfect because sock season is upon us here in Montana. I mean, the great thing about socks is you get to enjoy them all year, but the cozy delight that you get from socks during the depths of winter brings it to a whole new level. Think about it. Bombas sent us these chunky rag calf socks. It's like slipping your feet into a thick, cozy sweater made just for them. And if you like your feet to be free but still need that cozy feeling, you can try their slippers. When you buy from Bombas, your feet feel good and so does your conscience, because with every purchase, Bombas donates an item to people who would otherwise go without. New customers get 20% off their first purchase at bombas.com/SciShow using code SciShow at checkout.
Next up is another sweet treat that's high on the list of common food fakes, because this tree juice is basically liquid gold. Of course, we're talking about maple syrup. It's kind of an open secret that a lot of the cheaper stuff on store shelves is just flavored corn syrup, but that's all good and well as long as the ingredients list is honest. But unfortunately, that isn't always the case, and there are some fraudsters who try to get away with lying about it. One major bust happened in 2000 when a Vermont maple syrup distributor was found guilty of adulterating his maple syrup with cane sugar and ordered to pay back over $300,000 of ill-gotten gains. To detect these frauds, researchers use something called phenolics. Phenolics are a type of molecule that plants make, and they're fairly distinctive across groups. By building a profile of the phenolics in real maple products, they hope to come up with a straightforward test to distinguish between real and fake maple, which means fewer people falling for scams. And speaking of something that goes great in a pie, vanilla is another expensive spice that's often faked. But that's not the problem. The trouble is, it's often mislabeled. You've probably seen imitation vanilla in your grocery store's baking section. On the label, you'll see it's called vanillin, and it's a super common flavoring agent in all kinds of stuff. It also has applications in metal plating and other industrial settings, which is wild. I bet those job sites smell awesome. Although vanillin is sometimes made from rice, it's often petroleum-based, so that's not great, emissions-wise. But no, that doesn't mean that imitation vanilla is unsafe to eat. Vanillin is held to every standard of food safety and is tried and tested as safe for consumption. Since real vanilla is so pricey, it's nice that we have a cheaper option, unless you're trying to pass imitation vanilla off as the real stuff, which is illegal. A 3-year investigation in France found that as many as 23% of vanilla products were falsely labeled. They said they contained vanilla when they actually contained the synthetic vanillin. Some producers might be swapping the real stuff for the cheap stuff, or cutting their real vanilla extract with the synthetic. But there's a test for that. To check whether a product is vanilla or vanillin, you can just look at the carbon isotopes. See, when it comes to plants, there are 3 different ways that they can do photosynthesis, and each of them results in a different profile of carbon isotopes in the plant's tissues. Real vanilla plants use a photosynthetic process called crassulation acid metabolism, or CAM, and the isotope signature produced by CAM plants is completely different than what you find in any synthetic vanillin. So all we've got to do is stick a sample in an isotope ratio mass spectrometer and bust some vanilla imitators. While food fraud might be a crime most of us don't think much about, scientists are determined to keep it out of our supermarkets. Hopefully, now you can appreciate the work that went into making sure your little bear bottle is full of nothing but the best honey, or that your vanilla cupcakes are made with the real thing. Bon appétit.